On this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly, in 2013 we took a look at the Everdrive N8, a flash cart that allows you to load ROMs onto your original NES. Well, now 7 years later, the Everdrive N8 Pro has been released. But is it worth picking up for a first-time buyer, and is it worth upgrading to if you already own an Everdrive N8? So, in the 7 years since we looked at the original Everdrive N8, the retro gaming landscape has changed quite a bit. And if you're somebody who just wants to play NES games, you have far more options available to you than you used to. Now, on top of using just an emulator on your computer or an emulator on like an Android handheld device, you can get a Raspberry Pi, you can get a Mister, you can of course get Nintendo's own products like the NES Classic, and you can even hack it and add more games to it. Or you can get a Switch and even play the games with pseudo-original controls. But if you're somebody who just wants to play NES games on an NES, but either doesn't want to invest a lot of money in cartridges or just doesn't mind supplementing your library with ROMs, then a flash cart is what you want, and that's where a device like the Everdrive comes in. Now, obviously this video is about the Everdrive N8 Pro, but right now, both the Everdrive N8 and the Pro are still available. Features and differences: both the N8 and the N8 Pro allow you to load NES ROMs, Famicom ROMs, and Famicom Disk System ROMs. The N8 costs about $118 direct from the manufacturer, and the N8 Pro is $169 direct from the manufacturer, so it's about $50 more expensive. The N8 Pro can load ROMs up to 16 megabytes in size, whereas the original N8 can only load ROMs up to 1 megabyte in size. We'll get into more detail about that later. The N8 Pro can load ROMs about 50 times faster than the original N8, but all that really translates to is a game taking 5 or 10 seconds to load versus loading instantaneously. The N8 Pro supports up to 99 save state slots, whereas the original N8 only supports 1. The Everdrive N8 Pro has an in-game menu, which we'll also talk about later, while the original N8 does not. The N8 Pro has a real-time clock, but the only thing it uses that for is file labeling, because there are no NES games that take advantage of a real-time clock. When you get your Everdrive N8 Pro, it does come packaged in a nice box, but it doesn't come with any documentation whatsoever. Now, you can go to the manufacturer's website and download a pretty detailed PDF user manual, but I think it would have been nice if the product had at least come packaged with, say, a one-page quick start guide. Because I think for a lot of people, they get a device like this and they're not really sure how to set it up, which we're going to talk about right now. So when you get the product, you do still need to obtain an SD card. If you get the original Everdrive N8, that takes a normal SD card. If you get the N8 Pro, that takes a micro SD card. For either device, if you get any SD card that's at least 4 gigabytes in size, you are covered. Now, as with any new SD card that I buy, I stick it in my computer and the first thing I do is format it. The N8 Pro supports FAT16, FAT32, and exFAT. I don't really know the differences between them and why you would choose one over the other. I just picked FAT32. Once you have it formatted, you need to go to the manufacturer's website and go to the product page, scroll down a little bit. You need to download the latest version of the OS. They are constantly updating the OS with new features and compatibility fixes, like adding mappers and whatnot. And so you do kind of want to stay abreast of OS updates. It's super easy. Unzip it, it'll just be a folder, and just drag that whole folder to the root of your SD card. Like, don't open the folder, just drag the whole folder over there. Once you do that, all you need to do is add ROMs. So one of the questions I get most commonly on these Everdrive videos is like, does it come with an SD card? Does it come preloaded with games? And no, but it's very easy to just get them yourself. You want to unzip or unpack the file that you download and then drag that whole thing onto the root of your SD card. Not inside the OS folder that's already on the SD card, but just drag that all to the root as well. And that's all you have to do. Then you're ready to go. Go ahead and take the SD card out of your computer, stick it back in to your Everdrive, and stick your Everdrive into the NES and turn it on. When you turn on your system with the Everdrive in there, you're presented with the file browser, basically. And from here, you can load ROMs, you can access the main menu. If you want to just go ahead and play a game, you would highlight the game that you want to play and hit A. That brings up the ROM menu, and just hit A again, and it will load the game. The game will load nearly instantaneously, and you'll be able to play it just like you would play a real cartridge. New to the N8 Pro, as I mentioned, is this in-game menu. And you can change the button configuration that opens that menu, but the default setting, which I think is fine, is to hold down on the D-pad and the start button. That brings up an in-game menu, and from there you can load or save states, and you can exit back out to the file browser if you want to load a different game. Now, one thing I want to say about save states, because this is another point of confusion for a lot of people with these Everdrives, is the difference between normal game saves and save states. With either of these Everdrives, you can save any of your games normally as you would the real cartridge. So if you're playing like Final Fantasy and you want to save your game in the game, like using the in-game menu system, you can just do that. But what a save state is something that basically takes a snapshot of wherever you are in a particular game. So if you're at some point in, say, like Mega Man 2, where you have a hard time jumping across a platform and maybe you're going to die, you can take a snapshot, which is called a save state, before you start that area, and then if you die, you reload that save state and you're right back to where you were when you saved it. At the file browser, you can access the Everdrive's main menu, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about all the options that are in the main menu, just because those are gone into in detail in the user manual. One nice feature, though, in the main menu is that you can go down to an option called Recently Played, and it will show you a handful of the last games that you just played, so that you can easily go like, oh, I want to play this game I was playing yesterday, go down to Recently Played, and you can reload the game from that menu instead of having to dig into your file system and find it again, which I think is pretty nice. But inside the option menu, you'll notice something that says Audio Balance. And what Audio Balance is for is Famicom Enhanced Audio. So what is Famicom Enhanced Audio? I'll just give you a warning right off the bat that it does require you to do a very basic mod to an NES, but it involves solder and wires and whatnot. I know it's not for everybody. You're not really missing out on basic functionality if you don't enable Famicom Enhanced Audio. But if you try to play a game that uses this Famicom Enhanced Audio and your system isn't modified for it, it's going to sound weird. So what is Famicom Enhanced Audio? Well, basically in Japan, the Famicom was wired up a little bit differently in that it sent the system audio through the cartridge port before it went, out to the RF modulator or to the RCA out in the case of the Famicom AV. And what that meant was that developers could add sound chips to their games that would basically add additional sound channels to the system's audio. Now, when Nintendo redesigned the Famicom to be released in North America as the NES, unfortunately they got rid of that functionality. But if you're willing to make a very basic modification to your NES, so you do need to have solder and a little bit of soldering skill and some wire, it's really a very basic beginner mod to try. But if you're willing to do that, then you can load the Famicom Enhanced Audio enabled ROMs on the Everdrives and enjoy the better audio that you get. Now, probably the most famous and well-known example of Famicom Enhanced Audio is Akumaju Densetsu, which we of course know as Castlevania 3. Supposedly the N8 Pro has like improved audio circuitry over the original N8. So what you're going to see is a clip of an American NES version of Castlevania 3, so no enhanced audio. Then you're going to hear the original Everdrive N8's enhanced audio through Akumaju Densetsu, and then you're going to see the same game and hear the same game through the N8 Pro. And I'm going to leave it up to you to decide if you can hear the difference. To be honest, I don't really hear the difference. But here it is. Check it out. So again, I can't really appreciate the difference in the audio between the N8 and the N8 Pro. To me, the Famicom enhanced audio sounds great on both. Maybe if you're playing your games on a really expensive stereo, those differences come out. I'm not really sure. Another nice thing that a flash cart allows you to do is play ROM hacks on your original hardware. And, you know, normally if you think of ROM hacks, maybe you think of like reskinned games and whatnot, and you're thinking, well, I don't really care that much about that. But ROM hacks also include translations. So you could play games like that have never been released in the US, like an English translated version of Final Fantasy III. And Konami's future set role-playing game Lagrange Point, which is another great example of Famicom enhanced audio, also has an English translation, and that's another game that you can play if you have a flash card. Probably the biggest upgrade, at least in my opinion, that the N8 Pro has over the N8 is that increased ROM size capability. Now you can play ROMs that are over 1 megabyte in size. Now, if all you want to play are the retail releases, this really doesn't affect you. Like, there are no, especially North American releases, there are no licensed releases that even come that close to 1 megabyte. So that's not something you have to worry about. There are some ROM hacks that are bigger than 1 megabyte that might be kind of cool to look at. There's the Super Mario All-Stars ROM hack for the NES, although all that really is all 4 of those games put together into one ROM. But other things like Zelda: The Legend of Link, which is really basically a whole new Zelda game, is definitely cool to check out. Along with things like the Final Fantasy VII Demake, which is like an 8-bit version of Final Fantasy VII. As well as the English translation of Metal Slater Glory, which is a HAL Laboratories adventure game, which was somehow, I guess, unlicensed, I'm not really sure. But that one's just a hair over 1 megabyte, so you can't play that one on a normal Everdrive N8. So as far as giving a recommendation goes, it just really depends on your personal use case and your personal preferences. Everything I've talked about in this video, from being able to just play games as ROMs, to playing fan translations and ROM hacks, to enjoying Famicom enhanced audio and playing large-sized ROMs, you don't have to have original hardware and something like a flash cart to do those things, especially these days. You can play games on an emulator on your computer, or you can use a Raspberry Pi, or you can use a Mister, or you can buy an analog NT and jailbreak it. These products are really for people that have a Nintendo and want to just play a game on their Nintendo NES. Which one you should get depends on really what you want to do with it exactly, and I think depends on whether or not you already have one. So for me, I bought the Everdrive N8 7 years ago, and I'm still quite happy with it. What the N8 Pro brings to the table as far as, immediate ROM loading, the in-game menu so that I can switch games without having to get up, the 99 save state slots, the increased ROM size, and the supposedly improved audio quality, I don't think it would be worth $50 for me to say, I already have this, but I'm going to still buy this. But that's me personally. If you're somebody that doesn't have an Everdrive at all, you might want to consider the N8 Pro. It's a newer product. It's probably going to be supported in the form of OS updates longer than the N8. And maybe you don't know yet whether or not you want to have all those save states, or whether or not you want to play large-sized ROM hacks like the Final Fantasy VII remake. Maybe for you, it's worth spending the extra $50 and just getting the top-of-the-line product and being done with it. But, that really involves you deciding what exactly you want out of an Everdrive. So, that being said, I've always said Everdrives are great products, and I still feel that way. I appreciate the fact that the Everdrive people still think of me to make videos like this. I hope you found this helpful, and that it helps you make a purchasing decision, whatever that might be. So that's going to do it for this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.